In today's video, I'm going to be talking about editing and finding an edit that you love. One of the biggest things that I always see come up in mentoring, it's actually probably one of the reasons why people come to me the most. They're struggling with their edit, they can't get consistency, they're not happy with how presets are sitting. So I'm here to talk through some of the things that I do that I think are really helpful, but also help you to consider issues that might be happening while you're shooting. Because from experience, actually what I think makes the biggest difference to how well presets sit on your pictures is the quality of the images that you're starting with in the first place. And I'm going to talk through that. So as always with all of my editing videos, and you can see quite a few, I think this is the fourth or the fifth one that I've put on my YouTube now. This one was at Heads of House in the UK. As always with all of my editing videos, I'm trying to show you a range of lighting, really see how the presets are going to sit, but also how you might combat issues that are cropping up. I'll also be sharing some general shooting tips because you can't always be in the right place in comparison to the sun. You can't always make your way through a room to get to the best location. There might be people around. The sun changes so much on a wedding day. There's all sorts of different things, which might mean that you're left with a moment that you really want to fit into the gallery because it's a really precious moment, but the light might not be working with you. So I'm going to basically just try and cover as much as I can. It's quite heavy on movement, so you'll never really see those like static poses, and also impact how well presets sit on it, because depending on how high you had your shutter speed when you are shooting, lower the shutter speed you might have more blur, and blur is also another thing that can affect how well presets sit on it. So you can see here we've got low light inside, spotlights, we've got artificial light here, lots of indoor spaces, a mix as well of indoor spaces with flash and without flash. Let's dive in straight away, and all I'm going to do as I'm going through this is I'm going to show you what I would do and then any hacks as I go through. Typically my go-to is soul food. This was quite an overexposed image in post. I'm just trying to capture the fluffiness of these flowers. Really, that's what I want the focus to be. So I'm going to crop that in nice and low, and I'm happy with that for what I want the image to be about. Moving on to the next one, we've got some gorgeous even light here. It's overcast, but you can see that there's still some light going through. Her skin looks gorgeous. And when I'm editing, I'm always editing for the skin. So I'm going to go in with Soul Food. I actually think that looks a bit unnatural, so I'm going to reduce it down to 80%. And this is something that I recommend doing quite a lot when you're working with different presets, that if it's like bang on straight away, don't feel like you need to add the whole preset. You can also go down and experiment, like actually I really like Positano with this one, and then I'm going to go in, and that is almost a one-click edit. I've just played with the exposure. So that would be my first tip. Don't always feel like you've got to apply the full preset. You can go in and just apply a percentage, and that works really well for things like direct light as well when you're not wanting to change it too much. So this one inside, straight away I'm thinking this is black and white because it's quite moody, but even black and white it's quite dark, so I'm just gone in and brightened it up. And the whole point of this is that you can see the detail on the name, and I'm happy with that. Moving on to the next one. This one is got no light really. It's a very, very flat image. So usually I'd say Tuscany, but because it's flowers, I'm going to try really hard to save it. So quite a lot of the Faye Wilde presets are one click, and straight away I'm thinking for these gorgeous reds down here and also the depth, the vibe of these flowers were like organic, growing out of the table, quite mysterious, quite like poison ivy vibes between these two. And actually you can see that the shadows are a bit lighter. So I'm actually going to go with Saint-Tropez, which I did develop for like bright floral colour schemes. When I'm looking at the highlights, you can see here that this has got a little bit of a blue tint. When you up the temperature, you'll see that it's gone yellow all over the place, which is not what we want. So I'm going to go down to the colour mixer and I'm going to try. Now, if I try doing the yellows on this, it's making the whole image look a little bit flat, which is not what I want. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to change the vibrancy instead. And for me, for this image, that works better. Going on to the next one, soul food is usually my go-to. Once you've played through with the presets within the pack, you'll probably find that you want to keep using the same one for the same lighting. So because Saint-Tropez worked so well on the last one, which was in the same room, I know that that's probably going to work really well on this one because it was taken in the same time, basically. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to do that. So something that I do quite a lot when I'm editing is I keep going out and looking at the images together just to make sure that they all look aligned. So right now, these 4 for me look really great. This one's looking a little bit too bright. So I'm going to go in. Before I play with the exposure, I'm going to play with the whites because it's just a subtle issue. And then straight away, I'm really, really happy with that again. So going into this, the focus is, of course, pictures of the table. So black and white is going to really help me to get more drama. Now, with the presets in the preset pack, Old Hollywood and Pearl, these were my everyday presets for a long time when I first started. And sometimes I will still use them as a percentage. But my edit style has got a lot softer now. And I tend to flitter between the two in the summer edit. Tuscany's my go-to. That's my everyday preset for black and white at the moment. The Ibiza one is also really nice. And this one is definitely more of a fine art edit vibe. The shadows are quite even. I'm really loving this for like summer weddings, destination weddings. It just suits it and it's really, really complementary to the skin. Tuscany is a bit more... You've got a bit more depth with the shadows, which for this image, because I want the drama of the tablecloth, that's what I'm loving, so that's what I'm going to go for. Moving on to the next one, it's probably going to be a black and white edit for me, just because, so if I press the slash button, you can see the quality of this image, just because there's so little light in the room, it is looking quite flat. Now, usually you would use flash, but because we're shooting through a table, you're going to end up with crazy shadows all over them, which depending on the vibe that you're going for, could be a moment. But also because this was a workshop, I try not to shoot flash too much because you're working alongside lots of other photographers. So sometimes it feels quite selfish to use lots and lots of flash. So in this case, I'm going to use a black and white to save it. Going on to the next one. So we're outside. Compared to this image that we saw up here, if we look at the raw, you'll see that there's more natural contrast in her skin. Her skin looks really even, really, really glowy. With this one, preset is not going to sit as nicely on the skin. For something like this, I'd usually use Soft Touch. It's my go-to for like poor light. You can see that it's made her skin look a little bit pinky. Before I go into the colour mixer and I start playing around with the skin, the saturation, all that jazz, I'm just going to try and tweak the vibrancy. I'm quite happy with that now as it sits. It still looks really natural. Her skin still looks really healthy. What I also like to do for really close-ups of skin is to go in and add a little bit of grain. Now, one thing that I wanted to show you is quite often what I see with the presets that I always think is a bit problematic is when people use them but they put the exposure way too low. The lower that you go with the exposure, you almost need to compensate with contrast, because if you don't, everything's just going to be looking really, really flat and muddy. I mean, the light is quite good on this image, so it's not as... But if you're looking at the skin tones and it's not looking healthy, it's not looking glowy, just try upping your exposure a little bit. It's a really good idea to have your screen on like half brightness, because when your clients print their images, that's the brightness that they're going to get. When I first started in photography, I used to have my brightness on full whack, and I found that when people were ordering prints, they were saying that it was coming out really dark, it wasn't matching, all that jazz. Whereas now I keep my brightness on lower, and then I know that when they print, or no matter what the screens they're looking at, it's going to be consistent across the board. It doesn't really matter what brightness level you have it on. You might prefer to edit with your brightness level up to like full. It just means that whenever you edit, you need to use the brightness on the same thing. And that's something that people don't take into consideration. You should be editing with the same brightness. Your screen should ideally be in the same location as much as possible. Of course, we're always editing on the go, so it's not always possible. But for your final edits, your final gallery, find a corner in your house that you're obsessed with, where you're always happy with the images that you produce in that corner, and your final gallery should only ever get sent after you've checked all of the images through in that space. Because even things like where the windows are, the colours of the walls, everything like that will affect the consistency of your edit. So sneak peeks, yep, 100% on the go. There's no other way of doing it, you know, especially if you're a destination photographer. But with your final edits, try and find a space in your house where you can just make sure that you've got that final bit of consistency. So again, I'm going out and I'm just making sure that I'm happy. And what I'm really looking for, because of course we've got a mix of black and white and colour, all I'm really looking for is that the images aren't too different from the original, because my whole ethos with all of my editing is that I want to get it right when I'm shooting, and then in post, everything should be looking perfect, basically, like as close to the original as possible. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to copy and paste these onto images with similar light. Same with the outdoor one. I'm just going to copy them and just go through just to save myself a little bit of time. And then I'm not sure which ones I've still got. So I might just whack a base preset on there and then go in and tweak. So all I've done is I've filtered by not edited in that group. And then I'm going to go in and tweak. So in here, I'm just going to straighten it up. Lovely. Now, this is a little bit noisy. It's not too bad, but that's what happens when you're working without flash. But I'm just going to go in and compensate for that with the grain. It's really, really tempting to just put everything in black and white, but for the suppliers, for the florist, for the sign maker, just giving them that variety. The fact that they've just got that variety means it's more likely that they're going to use your work, because you're not just providing lots of the same image. Here is a really flat image. It's a gorgeous image, but it's a flat image. So I'm going to show you what I would do in this situation just to save it. First of all, I'm going to go in and I'm going to up the contrast, and then I'm going to up the temperature. I'm going to up the exposure ever so slightly, but then it's a bit too bright. Lower the contrast ever so slightly. And then I'm going to up the grain even more. So the size, it's basically just the size of the dots, and I like quite a muddy finish. I feel like when you put the size on smaller, it just looks like noise rather than grain. So I tend to go bigger. And then I've just got the same issue that I had earlier with their skin. And you get this quite a lot at weddings when people have fake tan, that sometimes it can look a little tiny bit fluorescent when you apply your preset. So I've just tweaked that. Right. My issue here, the inner monologue in my head, is that I've upped it and I like how bright it's looking, but now I'm worried that it's not going to be in line with my edit. So I'm just going to go out and yeah, you can see comparing it to those two, there's still like a bit of a pinky hue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for the neck, because that's quite a pinky bit, and I'm just going to see, I can pull the saturation down ever so slightly, and you can just see there that it's less flat than it was before. This one is a black and white moment for me. I'm just focusing on the details. So every image, and for me that's an Ibiza image, it's a very fine art image, so that's why I'm going to use that. The lace is quite delicate, Tuscany's more dramatic, Ibiza, can you see the difference? You just get like more definition, which I really, really like. Going on to this one, so this has had a base edit, so I'm just going to upload it. So it's cutting across her teeth there, which is really unflattering. So I'm just going to move that ever so slightly. I can't put this one in black and white because the whole focus of this is these flowers. So I'm going to experiment and I'm going to add Capri, because Capri is really, really good for flowers. But it's looking a little bit too, it's making her skin look a bit unnatural, so I'm going to get rid of that. And then I'm just going to experiment with my crop a little bit, and I prefer that because before you were getting the dress and the flowers, and now you just get the neckline, which is really beautiful, and the flowers, which is great. We've got some light coming through and you can see shadows on here. I really love the textures of this bouquet. Normally I would try and do some shadow play, but because these are grasses, it's not like the easiest thing to make shapes with, flattering shapes with. But I really love that image. I'm just going to see if I can get more of a, like a rule of thirds thing almost here. And that I really like. So going on to this one, I mean, this one, it's a one click for me, with the copy and pasted settings. And I just want to share some tips about light. So you can see that the light is behind them. I don't know if I included the images of them walking over, but the light was really bright. It got really bright. When the light is bright, you should be getting blinded. Like the light should be up here in front of your face, behind your subjects, and their shadow should be touching you. And you always want to make sure that their head on their shadow is touching your feet, or like it's facing your feet. If it's low light, you always want it to be facing them, because the sun should be facing them. If it's low light, you want to have the sun facing them. Okay, so the sun will be behind you. So as a general rule, if it's low light, the sun is behind your head as a photographer. And if it's really bright, it's in front of you and you're going a bit blind. Typically, that's how you get the light in the most flattering place. What you absolutely don't want is for the sun to be at the side, because then you're going to get loads of really harsh shadows over them. We've got an indoor image. You'll see between this one and this one that we've experimented with both indirect light and direct light here. A really good tip for direct light is to get them to move their face all the way over. And you can see that I've tried to block it to get the drama onto her eyes. When I'm zooming in, because she's got so much direct light on her, the skin is looking a little bit harsh. So I'm just going to go in. I'm going to lower the texture quite a lot across the image. And then I'm going to up the grain to soften it up. I also do this a lot with super close-ups of skin, just so that it looks nice and soft. Remember that I'm always editing for the skin. If you look at the difference, it's still really close to the original image, but it's really flattering. This one, it's a one click for me. The only thing that I'm not loving is the fact that we've cut the feet off here. So I'm going to go across and just change it ever so slightly so that it feels a bit less disjointed. Okay, so with this one, we're going to flip it. Now, the issue with this is that it's completely changed the image. With stationery, with paper, you want to make sure that it's as close to the original image as possible. So now I'm going to show you how I would use the colour mixer tool. So I'm going to reset the edit on this photo. And then I'm going to go in, and soft touch is usually my go-to for this. So I'm just doing a percentage. I'm going to lower that. So either you could, and you can see it still looks really edited like up here, but the actual colours are quite similar. So I'm still not happy with this. This should be like a chartreuse green. So we're going to go in and we're just going to play with the hue. And all I'm doing, really happy with that. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but with the luminance, because it's a bit brighter. And then I'm going to go in and press the dash. Can you see how similar that is? So when you've got things that need to be a specific colour, this could be things like bridesmaid dresses, specific colours that are in the palette, anything like that, mother of the bride dresses. It's really important to get the colours as similar as possible, in my opinion. I actually studied colour theory at uni, so the colours have always been incredibly important to me. And it's not possible to create presets that are gorgeous for all the different skin types, but then also work on all these, you know, weird and wonderful colours as well. So that's why I wanted to come in, show you how the colour mixer works and what I would do in that situation. And then I'm just going to keep going through. This is a black and white to me. Just love the drama of that. I'm just going to try and make it a bit more symmetrical, so I'm using the shape of the door to get it in place. Love that. Here we've got a flash image, but it's quite dark. So I'm going to go in. Again, love the black and white on this. And it's already quite straight, which is great. You could also go into Photoshop and get rid of the plugs. Love this. So this, again, the light at this point had got quite flat. So the easiest way when you've got flat light is to just go in and up the exposure and up the contrast. And then just for the vibes, I'm going to add a little bit more grain. Gorgeous. Like, all I've done there is just changed the exposure and it's so much better. Again, the easiest thing to be would just be to do black and white. And sometimes there are just a lot of black and white moments. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to show you how I would edit it. So soft touch I'm going to use. I'm going to go up. It keeps it quite similar to the original. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of grain. So if you did want to keep it and lower the texture a little bit as well. I'm actually looking at this image and I'm thinking it might be a little bit noisy. So I'm going to go in and just up that ever so slightly. Like, yeah, it is a black and white moment, but just in case you wanted to see how I would edit it in colour. And then it's looking a little bit intense. I'm just going to go down with the vibrancy ever so slightly. And then I'm happy with that. So with this, I'm just going to up the colour. Here we've got the stationery, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to copy that and add it to here. Up the exposure, and then it's just looking a little bit flat. So all I've done is I've upped the temperature. The priority for me is that the colours are as similar as possible, and those are great, which is what we love. This one, absolutely perfect. Really happy with that. No notes. Same with this one. I think sometimes we think that we don't like the edit because actually we don't like the original image. But realistically, in a wooden room like this, it is going to have like a little bit of a ready tint to it, and that's absolutely fine. As I get more into photography, I actually am getting quite good at just accepting that that's what the room looks like. I quite like this like warm ambient vibe. This, however, is where we look at the before and after. This is way too intense. I'm going to reset the edit on this one. I'm going to go in. So Soul Food is my go-to for flash. I'm going to reduce it ever so slightly. Again, I'm looking at the edits. And I'm thinking it's still a bit too intense. I'm going to reset it again and try soft touch. And I'm a lot happier with that, but it is still looking a little bit intense. So I'm just going to go down and reduce the vibrancy and then go in and crop. I think I edited this in black and white and I left it at black and white. I do much prefer the black and white, and out of the two, for this one, the skin, if you look at the difference, the skin is looking better with the Tuscany, so I'm going to leave it at that. Right, this one, very, very similar light source to this one. So I'm going to copy and paste into here. And that's looking a little bit better, but I'm still not 100% happy. So as I said earlier, when I'm not happy with how flat an image is, I'll just go in and I'll up the exposure and I'll up the contrast, and then I'm happy with that. Quite often, all you need to do is change the exposure and the white balance. Those are always the easiest things to do. Like this one, it's looking gorgeous. It's just a little tiny bit flat, so I'm just going to tweak, bring that down ever so slightly, up the white balance, and then it's straight away. We get really carried away with changing all of these different things, but often it is just the white balance and the exposure. Right, so this one, the preset, can you see the greens? It's the preset that I used before, maybe because I was changing it for the skin. It's washed it out ever so slightly. So out of these two, can you see how Saint-Tropez is probably better for the greens, but the skin, I think, is looking better with Capri. So I'll just show you there so you can compare. I think Capri is looking better. So I'm going to do that. And then for the next one, I think this is going to be a black and white. So depending on the finish that you want. For me, as I say, my go-to favourite is Tuscany at the moment. Like, I'm absolutely obsessed with it. And then I'd go through and get rid of these in Photoshop. Last bits. And normally I really love soul food, but these girls all had quite a lot of fake tan on, so soft touch is a bit better because it just chills it out a little bit. The easiest thing again would just be for a lot of these flash ones to put them in black and white, but I really want to show you how I would edit them if I wasn't putting them in black and white, because I do appreciate that I'm just obsessed with black and white and not everybody wants 50% of their gallery to be in black and white. This one, however, I think just because there's so many different colours going on and it can be quite distracting, that actually the black and white edit makes the focus the girls, which I feel like for this moment it should be. And it just looks really authentic, like really old school Hollywood. I love that. And actually, there's still most of them in colour, so I've not done as bad as I thought putting too much in black and white. I'm just making sure that I'm really happy with the consistency of the white balance and the temperature, basically, and the exposure. And then if there's any that I think are looking a bit mismatched, I'll just go in. And again, there are these distractions that I've not got rid of because I'm just focusing on colours and consistency. And then this one is looking really, really bright. So I'm just gonna bring that back down and that looks more in line. This one's looking a little bit flat and a bit bright. There we go, that looks better. So I'm just looking at them as a collective of images, and that's the easiest way to go in and just then make like little subtle tweaks to make sure that you're 100% happy with it. And you're literally just doing like tiny things. Then you've got this collective of images which all feel like they're singing from the same hymn sheet. The tip that I wanted to give you if you're really struggling with your edit is use Lightroom Cloud rather than Lightroom Classic for this specific activity, because the interface is so much cleaner. You don't have all the grey, all the different things, all the flags, all that jazz. Everything is really, really easy to see in terms of differences. When you are editing a new gallery, when you think you've done, so edit in Lightroom Classic if that's what you normally use, but when you think you've done, export the raws and put them into like an exemplar folder like we've done here. So an activity that I do with my mentees is I get them to create a folder, let's call it Edit 2025, and to go through their 5 favourite galleries and drag out 20 images, 25 images from each gallery representing a massive range of light sources, and like not just nice overcast images, like loads of different problems. And then they'll end up with like a massive collection of images, and then just go through and do what I've just done. Edit a little bit, have a look at it as a whole, tweet. And then your edit folder is basically your exemplar. So anytime that you're editing new work moving forward, edit in Lightroom Classic as normal if that's what you normally use, or in a separate folder. But before you hit send on those sneak peeks, put them into this gallery and compare with the rest of your edits, see how it's fitting, because it takes us a long time, and quite often people don't, like, I think people take it for granted how much the light changes the colours and how well a preset applies to an image. Like, I've got 2 preset packs and I use probably out of those presets like 7 or 8 every single time I edit, because depending on what the colour is of the room, the light source, it completely transforms the preset. And that's why you end up getting so many different presets in these preset packs. It's because there's no way that you could have one preset that works in all these different light sources. Like, different ones are good for different things. And you'll probably find that, for example, for me, I know straight away if an image is a Tuscany image or a Portofino image, or if it's a soul food image. Like, in my head, I know straight away what I'm going to apply. So if you're struggling with your edit, do create that edit, those 5 galleries that you're obsessed with, put those light sources in, put those images in from all the different types of light, and then edit, keep coming out, checking that everything's cohesive together before exporting them, and then you'll be happy. If you've got any ongoing issues, you've got anything that you're struggling with, please pop it in the comments. Like, I'm always looking to make these YouTube videos as helpful as possible. And I really do want you to get as much out of using the presets as possible. There's been so many different little things that I do that I've shared here, so hopefully that helps. I just wanted to also quickly show you the Faye Wilde Education website. In here, you've got lots of presets, but also this free one. I'll pop a link down below for a video of me editing my Dolomites workshop, showing you how this preset works. You can also see lots of other examples of editing via my YouTube. And in those videos, I'm not just showing you how the presets work, but I'm explaining my thought process behind what I'm doing, how I'm tweaking the images to get the best possible result. You can also see on here lots of other resources that you may find helpful depending on what stage you're at in your photography journey. On the blog, you've got lots of articles for free resources as well. Thank you so much for being here. Do consider liking and subscribing if you found this helpful. Like I said, any questions, pop them in the comments, and hopefully see you again soon.